The root of this evil is, I think, 70 years old or maybe 45 years old, because components which do not belong together have been put together in a very awkward way. Now, the communists have managed to keep those nations together by force, and once you start with democratic processes, these old ties have somehow ceased to exist.
And finally, Mr. Rupel, do you believe then perhaps that forces like the European community, like these foreign ministers, could perhaps be the mediators who could help you forge this new order, whatever it is to be?
Well, I think that that's quite correct, yes. I think that the EC ministers, or the EC authorities anyway, are in a perfect position to put pressure on the central government of Yugoslavia to stop sending bombs and start sending negotiators, people that we could talk to.
From first light this morning, it was clear the fragile ceasefire was barely holding. Even as the EC foreign ministers flew back to Luxembourg, these militia were once more fanning out around the Vršnica army base south of the Slovenian capital. Across the fields, the tanks and sentries of the Federal Army, still trapped by impromptu barricades and hidden landmines. No peace talks here, and no backing down. On major roads, no relaxation in Slovenian security measures. This Red Cross team among those held at gunpoint while police searched their vehicles. At midday, Slovenians heard their president tell them there was no turning back from independence. In bars and cafes, they weighed Slovenia's stand against the probability of continuing violence. Violence which has stiffened resolve in the village preparing to bury the farmer killed during yesterday's air raids.
What has happened is terrible, but I believe our president and people should complete the task we have begun.
Close by, one attempt at conciliation, Slovenian negotiators trying to find a way of releasing this federal convoy, trapped for 2 days by barricades and threatened by plastic explosives on a bridge overhead. The continuing blockade of the main highway between the Croatian and Slovenian capitals is an indication that whatever the politicians may say, deep suspicions remain on both sides. If that situation persists, it can only heighten fears of further bloodshed. Robert Hall, ITN, Slovenia.
As sirens wailed across Slovenia, its people ran in fear. The capital, Ljubljana, had the feel of a city under siege. The Federal Army had threatened decisive military action unless Slovenia honoured the ceasefire. That ultimatum had just expired. In underground shelters, citizens were warned of an air raid. The city froze, but no planes came. There was no proof they'd ever taken off. For the moment, a war of nerves had replaced the fighting. Slovenia's defence forces became increasingly twitchy. Security was tightened amid reports that Yugoslav federal troops dressed in plain clothes were trying to infiltrate the city. Slovenia braced itself for more aggression. The dozens of roadblocks set up to stall the advancing Yugoslav army now also served as barricades, behind which the Slovenians had cut themselves off from the outside world. Adding to their sense of isolation, the main airport had been sealed and shelled by the federal troops. That same army also controlled most border posts. Slovenia was effectively locked inside. Peering across the frontier, the neighbouring Austrian army, keen to make sure Yugoslavia's problems didn't spill over. The European community was exerting diplomatic pressure to resolve the conflict, threatening to cut off economic aid unless the warring factions stuck to the peace initiative. Slovenia's President Milan Kučan, now flanked by armed bodyguards, said his government was willing to freeze its drive towards independence and negotiate, but only if the army pulled out. Tonight he had his chance when Federal Prime Minister Anton Markovic paid an unexpected visit to Ljubljana to try and work out a compromise. With him came the region's military commander. It seems Yugoslavia's armed forces are literally calling the shots, ready to step in if the politicians fail to keep the country united. Like these defence force troops, the whole of Slovenia is waiting anxiously tonight to discover whether their future will be resolved by peace or by war. Jeremy Thompson, ITN in Ljubljana.
In cathedrals and churches across northern Yugoslavia, there were fervent prayers for peace today. Communities horrified by the bloodshed, hopeful that even at this late stage, Yugoslavia might yet avoid civil war. That hope foremost in the mind of Federal Prime Minister Ante Markovic, who travelled to Slovenia in the knowledge that last Friday's peace agreement had disintegrated within 24 hours. The key issue for those Slovenians waiting for news of a breakthrough was their right to independence, though their president has stressed again that they will agree to a 3-month delay on any further changes in their constitution. Any discussions must be overshadowed by uncertainty over the attitude of the Federal Army. Last night's ultimatum was delivered not by a politician, but by a member of the High Command, his tone making it clear that the army's patience was wearing thin. Added to that, the Slovenians' fear that they may already be under attack leads many experts to believe both sides may feel unable to turn back.
Things are not under control anymore. It is very doubtful, it's a big question mark. Under which orders, for example, the army is acting? Is it acting on its own? Is it still listening, partly at least, to the federal government? And of course, it is not listening to its constitutional supreme commander, which is the presidency, because the presidency really doesn't exist.
In Croatia, parliamentarians have been guarded in their response to Slovenia's hard line. The independence declaration here has been followed by a threat from Serbian extremists on Croatia's southern frontier, their security forces already on high alert. Many Croatian parliamentarians share the conviction with their Slovenian counterparts that the army may well have given the politicians one last chance. There is still talk of a peaceful solution here tonight, but it seems that only major concessions can lead to a step back from the precipice. Robert Hall, ITN, Zagreb.
It was stalemate on Highway 1 tonight. Slovenian militias still dug in on the wooded hillside overlooking the road to Ljubljana, prepared for the worst. For 5 days now, they've surrounded an armoured column of Yugoslav troops trapped on the motorway below. The Slovenians are demanding that the army leave their weapons and withdraw. So far, there's been no compromise. Across Slovenia, federal troops have found themselves beleaguered, marooned at the border or in their barracks. They claim they've been provoked by the local people who cut off their supplies. Tense and frustrated, the soldiers have kept their rocket launchers primed in readiness. Tonight, the army generals ordered their troops to shoot if attacked. They promised to airdrop supplies to keep the men going until an orderly withdrawal could be worked out. There's been contact between the two armies, but little trust. Yugoslav officers resent the demand for international observers to monitor the truce. Unless the military deadlock can be resolved, the peace initiative remains in jeopardy. Slovenian militia certainly weren't relaxing their defences of the capital, checking for political army undercover agents. Though the ceasefire was still precarious, most Slovenians believed they'd already achieved a victory on the road to independence.
I think that we have shown the so-called Yugoslav brotherly army that they are not brotherly at all and that they have been beaten any place, any time.
Slovenians showed no love lost for the army as they cleared the debris of battle from their alpine fields. The villagers of Moste had set this Yugoslav tank ablaze and said they'd do the same again unless the army was put under control. Whether or not they win their independence in the end, the people of Slovenia won't feel safe until all traces of the Yugoslav army have finally been removed from their territory. Jeremy Thompson, News at 10 in Slovenia.
The help and intervention by EC ministers for foreign affairs was vital and very useful. And as far as Croatia is concerned, I am convinced that it is a workable formula. The Croatian parliament and authorities do not have any reservation, and all conditions as presented by the Troika are acceptable.
But on the other hand, one feels it is just a breathing space that you are still determined to go on after 90 days with your independence plan.
Of course, it is a breathing period, but actually what I wish to underline that it is of paramount importance a ceasefire and to see that this ceasefire is respected and protected in this area. So I'm rather more inclined to concentrate on the period immediately in front of us and not at the moment to look on the period after the expiry of 90 days.
Well, I want to look at the role of the army in that in just a moment, but the other immediate event coming up externally is the meeting of the CSCE group in Vienna on Wednesday. Is there anything they can do?
Of course, I think here is the area which has been now ignited. It is very close to the Central Europe, and we are part of the Europe, and therefore I think that all principles which are laid down in the Paris Charter for Europe and CSC documents for reacting on any area which is involved in violence, is it the right time to see what can be implemented in the present situation.
If you confess that you need the outside help of diplomats and foreign ministers, is it not probable that you also need the outside help of some kind of security force that is going to see that this thing works?
I think that this situation might develop very soon, I'm afraid, and therefore some kind of the peace-making forces should be also considered, that we are approaching the appropriate time to implement into Slovenia, Croatia and the rest of the present Yugoslavia.
In other words, you think...
Here is the main problem is with the behavior of the army. The army is the old-fashioned, still Bolshevik or communist-dominated establishment. They are trying to preserve status quo, and they are trying to keep the domination of the communists over this area, and this is the root of the problem.
There is now to be a new Croatian president of the Republic as a result of the negotiations over the last few days. Does he have the charisma, the power to control the army, or is it, do you think, now impossible?
By constitution he has the power. Now it is the question whether those who are still having in the army actual power, whether they will obey the decisions worked out in the presidency. So it is a great step forward with intervention of the European Troika, and we do appreciate it very much, but the problem is not solved, and I think that everybody should concentrate how these conditions which have been implemented with the assistance of Europe will be observed.
Contact with the Slovenian militia. 5 miles north of Slovenia's southern border, federal armoured units deploying against the first of a series of roadblocks on the road to Ljubljana.
Look at that! They must go down! They must go down!
The armoured columns had moved out at speed earlier this morning from southern Croatia. There was no time for niceties. This village among those assessing the damage after the tanks had passed through. But the advance came to an abrupt halt. Slovenian militia have had a week to prepare, and the federal conscripts may have to fight their way up the only